We're going to learn from all the folks here up on stage how you can capitalize when using all these different technological advancements. So I want to introduce everyone. We have Lauren Woods right here from Southwest, Andy Markus from AT&T. We have Gustaaf Schrils from Omni Hotels and Resorts, and last Sandeep Davé from CBRE. So thank you all for joining us. Now, before we had I had conversations with each of you about volatility, because that seems to be the theme here. And I spoke with you about that, and what I want to dig into is how you can use technology to help deal with some of that. So Lauren, I'll start with you, because I know we were speaking about the changing customer, right? The changing customer, different travel demands, different generational shift in the customer, and also the crowded airspace. Yeah. So dig a little bit into that, but also talk to us about the technology you're using to help with those changes.
Sure. As we find past COVID and the pandemic, our travel behavior has changed. And so those core customers that used to fly all the time on Southwest are flying less on us. And so that means we have to fill our aircraft with customers that don't fly us all the time. Well, who are those customers but the younger generations? And so their expectations of how we're going to meet them and where they're going to find us and how we're going to communicate with them and how we're going to meet their needs from a service level all change from the older generations to the newer generations. So it's very important that we do things that are digital first. We meet them where they're at. We find them where they're at places like Google Flights and other things that we've done. Being able to do a lot more self-service. You know, our younger generations don't necessarily want to pick up the phone and call people. So we have to be able to give them what they need. All of that requires a certain amount of data and insights on who they are. And so that's really important that we get our data foundation correct.
Okay, and then I want to go from airlines to hotels. The hotel is Gustaaf, I'll head over to you.
Actually very similar.
Yes, very similar. You actually talked about, so the customer now has changed from U.S. travel to Europe travel post-COVID. Yeah. Talked about that, about how you have to change your loyalty program, make these experiences for the customer now. So go into a little bit of that, but also how you're using technology to do those things.
Yeah, so, you know, as you mentioned, you know, our guests are, you know, going, they're flying less. You know, the pandemic and, you know, and just inflation has caused them to do one big trip and then do a lot of car trips. And so, you know, with 50 hotels scattered, you know, throughout the United States, you know, some beautiful and unique experiences that we provide. There is a different way about going and finding customers. And so one of the things was to make the loyalty program more attractive. We make sure that now we not only allow them to gain points by staying overnight, but all the other ancillary services, like, you know, food, beverage, massage, spa. We have ski resorts, golf, and then make them eventually redeem those points for those experiences as well. Also be able to now, using the website, to be able to book tea times and spa times. And as you can imagine, plans change. So they cancel those reservations. So how do we deploy that back to those that are interested but couldn't find an available spot? And so we're using technology and AI to allow us to market those things that became available with very short lead times to those that are most likely to consume them. And so it's like a puzzle of dealing with speed, accuracy, and providing an overall, you know, enhanced experience.
Yeah, and you mentioned AI being used as kind of this automated concierge in a way, but you still have the physical person.
Yeah, in the upscale and luxury hotel group, it's highly unlikely that you'll be walking into the hotel and a robot will actually greet you and hand you a key to your room. So so there is still the need for personal service in luxury and upscale hotels. I suspect that in the lower, more extended stay and limited service hotels, that they will use more of those Gen AI abilities to bypass the check-in process and allow guests to get to the room. But we are still very focused in providing our guests a enhanced overall service. And so, but there is needs that many of you have stayed in hotels and press 0 or front desk and it rings and nobody answers. And so that is our ability to use Gen AI for concierge services at the hotel level to be able to answer those very simple questions. What's the best Italian restaurant? What's the closest steakhouse? What's the best attraction? Should I spend my night tonight? What's the concert? Those kind of things are all things that Gen AI would be able to really do very well.
Perfect. And Andy, I'd like to touch upon you. What kind of volatility do you see in telecom, and how are you using technology to meet those needs?
Telecom is a mature business, and we're doing everything we can to basically serve our customers and our shareholders more effectively. And a lot of that is thinking about how we use all this technology to deliver value back. And as the person that's responsible for data and AI at AT&T, that's my day job. That's what I live and breathe for, right? Is to use technology to deliver value to both the customers and our shareholders. And so we're doing this across the board. We're doing it in how we modernize our tech ecosystem to make that more efficient, more cost effective. And we're really, truly leaning into AI. AI is not new at AT&T. AT&T was kind of in the room when it happened, when the term artificial intelligence was created. It's truly foundational on how we run our company. But we've mentioned generative AI already today. It's opening up new avenues, but building on complementary tools of traditional AI, great data work and great automation work, but really leaning into how we serve our customers in the care experience, how we serve our customers in the field experience, how we run back office operations, everything from HR to finance to legal. Supply chain is a great application for this stuff. And then, AT&T is a huge software development company, right? We're truly, at its core, a technology company. We spend so much of our capacity building software, and we're reimagining that an entire software development lifecycle with AI and generative AI at the center, right? Everything from the user story to creating the test plan, to creating the code, executing the test plan, implementing the code. It's all kind of automated through generative AI. And so those dollars are very significant and really are meaningful in our bottom line.
Thank you. And Sandeep, when we spoke earlier, you had mentioned these multiple kind of perfect storms between COVID, people going back to the office, whether it be interest rates, sustainability, all these different things. Describe how that has impacted CBRE and also the industries that you serve.
Yeah, so commercial real estate, as I had mentioned, is in a perfect storm, or was in a perfect storm, with these confluence, with return to office, where suddenly none of us were in our offices, then some of us would be in our offices, no one really knows kind of a thing. That itself would be a tremendous impact on an asset class, but then there were high interest rates. So you combine those two, and it really becomes complicated. Then we manage over 7 billion square feet. And sustainability is a big demand. You bring all of that together, and what happens? What happens is that there is uncertainty. Uncertainty with respect to what is the right level to invest in a certain asset, which markets are going to move. And that's where technology comes in, because uncertainty creates fear. And therefore, as you've read in the news, commercial real estate has been in the news a little bit. Mm-hmm. And where technology can help is to create a bit more certainty around that this is how markets are moving. These assets are more valuable versus other assets. This is the time to invest versus dispose, and get predictive around certain things. The other requirement in uncertainty is to operate in an efficient manner and lower your cost of operations. And once again, technology has a role to play in terms of automating processes, in terms of just taking costs out in many different ways, applying AI, Gen AI, to get to those results. And we've been pretty actively doing that.
Excellent. And Lauren, when we spoke, you had mentioned too about cloud technology. Mm-hmm. So talk about the importance of that and how that has been changing as well.
Sure. Well, we started our cloud journey a couple of years ago, but it started around, funny enough, we decided to really push our operational apps into it. So flying our aircraft, which is highly, highly important, the cloud technologies help us to bring speed to market, help us to generate a lot, process a lot of information quickly, really help to also transform us internally from kind of some ways that we've always worked to a different way of working through these cloud technologies and really upskilling our technologists, but to be also taking our business along with us. So the business had to think differently about how they were processing information, or they were given tools at their disposal that they didn't have before. And so then that opened up their mind on how they would go forward and process things. So cloud technology has definitely been transformative for us in being able to think about also resiliency and security and other things that we take is very important to us as an airline, but then also help to push along the capabilities of our business, because really, we sell seats and we fly airplanes, and that's extremely important for us to do very, very well. And so as we've grown as an airline and more flights, the ability for cloud to be able to scale when we have a bad day in a hurricane, like last week, there's all these type of things that we have to be able to scale up and down, and cloud technologies help with that, as well as all the amazing capabilities around data and AI and other things that we're just being able to kind of take some momentum, and it keeps going and going and going with us.
Okay, now we've heard about some of the different advancements that you've done. I'm sure it wasn't easy, right? So I want to get into some of the challenges you faced when you started making some of these advances. So Andy, I'll start with you. What kind of challenges did you face? And for example, people in the audience who want to take that leap, what kind of advice could you give them for that?
Yeah, so I'll address that two ways.
Sure.
The first one, just as Lauren said, like the cloud journey, a really important journey for AT&T as well. It's not easy, and it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of persistence and perseverance. But when you get there, you get all the benefits that Lauren just mentioned. We have personally turned the corner on a lot of that, and we're seeing that now, and it's very fulfilling. So I think it's that. It's seeing that vision, having the plan, and the diligence to see it through. On the AI front, I'll talk about generative AI because that's really kind of such a focus of ours right now. We approach it from a few different ways. One, generative AI is a fairly easy entrant, kind of technology. But you have to think about it from an interoperability perspective. Being locked into any technology in this space today, I think, is risky because things are changing so fast. And so, as AT&T has built out, what we're doing, which we're looking at investments that are delivering, 2x in-year ROI on what we spend, a 20x 5-year return on investment. When we look at this, interoperability is key, and having a process that can operate across the enterprise, that keeps our data where we own it, that's not dispersed across systems, and our ability to plug and play the right technology for the right use case is super important for us.
Okay, and Sandeep, you had mentioned some of the successes that you have had with the technology, but what are some of the roadblocks or the challenges that you hit along the way, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, well, whenever I think about technical challenges or implementation of technology, I think of my younger self, and as a young software engineer, I used to write code and be very proud about what I'm doing and scoff at all the managers saying, these people are not doing real work. I'm the one who's doing real work. But as I've matured and lost some hair, I've realized that actually the technical implementation is the easier part. The harder part, and I'll go back to the examples that I was sharing before. We as an industry needed to get better at insights. And for that, thank God we had been working on an enterprise data platform that had ingested data from hundreds of different data sources over the years, harmonized it, cleansed it. That was one of the challenges, and even today I wouldn't say the job is done, because do we consistently capture data at scale clean enough for us to be able to do something with it? The other area is efficiency with respect to operations. Now, I can automate any process that you give me, that's easy to do, but have we sufficiently driven change in the organization where we can have a sufficiently impactful margin impact? And so those change dimensions are really the harder ones, in my opinion.
And how did you handle that? What were some of the things you did to kind of...
I wish there was a silver bullet. I think it was more so just chipping away one step at a time. For example, as far as our data is concerned, we as a team started producing reports on data. So we have about 750 rules that cut across all our clients. This is the quality of our data. For every market and sub-market, we are able to provide a scorecard saying this is the quality of our data, and then start working with the business stakeholders to say, okay, well, you have to change your processes, you have to change your incentives. Most importantly, incentives. You can do whatever carrot and stick, but at the end of the day, the incentives have to be in place. Somebody's bonus has to be tied to data collection to be able to make that change.
All right. And Gustaaf, what challenges did you see over at Omni?
I think, with change, managing change is super important. The best way to handle that is to get the customer involved quickly and frequently, so that it doesn't feel like something is being done to them rather than something you're doing together. And so managing change is what Sandeep said. Implementing the technology generally is the easy part. The more difficult part is getting people to adopt it, embrace it, and managing that change and being the ambassador for keeping that alive. And the best recommendation I have is really to involve your customers early on in the process.
Do you see the same thing at Southwest? Yes, I can see.
Right? Like you said, building it somewhat is the easy part, quote unquote. And it's the adoption of the change.
Absolutely.
And it is really funny. I was listening to all of you guys going, yep, that's how this works, right? So we have done a lot. We've done it over time. I'm very proud of that data foundation change of pulling in that data, making people understand that we want to have the data be our data and not give it away to some vendor so I can buy it back from them, right? Like that's something I really don't want to do. So that being said, it's so funny because it's the change of the business customer or our operators or our commercial or our marketing groups and all of them having to go through the change because, like it or not, they have their incentive to sell or to turn an aircraft or do, on-time performance. And so they're like, don't change my world, right? I know how to operate in this other world and I'm trying to do it. Well, we're trying to give them new tools and that causes them to have to change and do that adoption. Now, if you can get the right customer who can be your storyteller with you. So we were lucky enough, we have, there's a data science group that early on in the process, I said, if I can pull the stuff that you have hidden underneath your desk out and give you the better tool sets, will you come and play with me? And so he did. And so we've been able to really tell the story of saving money in this group, or turning an aircraft faster, or being #1 in completion factor, and really be able to tell the output that matters to them. So back to your story about the incentives, like if you can tell the story of change in their language and what matters, because it's easier for me to support one application, or it's easier for me to be in the new tool set because it makes my technologist really happy. But really what matters for them is, can I meet their objectives quicker and easier, and how do I get them to believe? Because they first and foremost see the change they have to go through and it will take too long, or they don't have the skills, and so there's a lot of resistance and you have to get past that. And so having a business customer go along or be your storyteller going, hey, you want to listen to her. She really knows, these teams really understand what they're doing and you're going to get the benefit from it. That adoption is like what you have to break through to really get the momentum going, because building it isn't, funny enough, the hard part.
I love that they say that. That's not the hard part. The hard part is getting everyone on board.
Yeah.
Which leads me to, I want to get to one of our questions from the audience, because this kind of plays in, okay, with the rise of AI and the continued cling to, I've read articles about this, dumb phones, fax machines, because you have this back and forth, old technology, new technology. How do you plan to innovate in a people place with such a diversity of tools at your team members' fingertips? So there's so much vast technology, new, old. How do you get people to kind of stay on top at your different industries? And you...
I mean, with AI, I mean, we're trying to meet the people where they are.
Yeah.
So we've created this platform called Ask AT&T, which is smart, really smart on AT&T information. People can go to that platform and have a great, AI, generative AI experience. But really the bulk of what we do is to serve APIs back into the screens that people work in, right? We're serving now over 1 billion tokens a day, over 130 million API calls back into these systems. Because it's very inefficient to have the people come out of their systems into another environment. And so the systems already have their interfaces. The systems already have, their way of working. We're just making them smart, the generative AI, component.
Okay, and speaking of the different types of technology, we all know that it's an investment, whatever you decide to get involved with. A lot of people ask about the return on your investment, and where do you see that in each of your different companies? Gustaaf, you had mentioned that it depends on how accurate the data is. So get a little bit into that.
So, applying any intelligence to, a set of data, and I think we all mention it in different ways, the data quality is extremely important. Otherwise, the results are going to not be accurate. And so I think we have been focusing on doing what I call the right things, and feel that by doing the right things, the return comes. It's very hard to measure in the initial stages of implementing AI what your true hard returns were. But if you can do something more accurate, faster, and improve your customer experience, I think that it's just a matter of getting the data artifacts from those changes and convert that into dollars. It's not as clear as I invested $1 million and I'm making $2 million. It's 100% return.
Right.
So.
And do you see that on the production, more than production side?
We've done it both ways, right?
Okay.
One way that we've done it is we've gone after and given a business customer a goal, right? So the customer was, take this much cost out of their organization. And they signed up for that goal. And then we went after them and said, okay, what are the problems you have to go solve to be able to make that happen? And so it wasn't hey, I'm going to hand you some AI. It was, tell me what your problem, well, that needs an RPA bot, but this needs generative AI about producing material. And then over here, we just actually need to take the system and get rid of this screen. And, so it was one of those things where we went after it with a goal in mind and then found the solutions for that. The flip side is we've done the fishing expeditions or something like we have a really good tool. What could we do with it? And we've invested in that more from an innovation standpoint and kind of went after it. And to your point, a lot of times there's not even good data about what you're improving, but it feels better, right? And so we've been trying to do both sides of that because sometimes those happy accidents happen out of that innovation side, and then all of a sudden you find the big thing to go after. And then on the left-hand side, sometimes it's the easier solves and not what you think you need a big AI program to really make take the $100 million out of their group. So it's an interesting dynamic for us is on both sides, and it's again having the business customer understand what did they sign up for one side, which has a certain amount of pressure behind it, versus the other side, which is going to be much more innovative, and then it's just kind of what's your tolerance on that investment for that innovation. So that's how we've done both of those sides of things.
And I think that this whole benefits tracking is a super important exercise in any technology investment or digital transformation. And then the communications bit is also critically important. So what we do outside of our keep the lights on investments, for all our investments are tied to strategic priorities. There is a clear business accountable executive who has signed up to deliver a set of benefits. Mm-hmm. And we try not to miss the forest for the trees, which is just step back and say, okay, well, this is a 2-year journey. What do we expect to see in 2 years? We automated 400 processes, and we have unlocked multiple digit $1 million in revenues, in efficiency benefits. And the second thing is really packaging it in a simple way for your CFO to consume, for your business stakeholders to consume, maybe communicate that further in investor calls. I think those are the two things that we remain hyper-focused on.
And I'll add to that.
Sure.
One of the things that we've done to kind of supercharge the return on investment is that we've partnered with the business to create a transformation office within the business, and we've given that group funding, and then the business works with that team on use cases that are properly, vetted through the CFO organizations. And then we prioritize that in a one-to-end fashion across the company. So we understand from a technology perspective, we're working on the things that drive the most value to the company, focusing on those business cases that drive free cash flow impacting benefit. And that's, I think, how we've supercharged the start of a lot of the work we're doing around, generative AI.
Now, we have a few moments left. I just want to get into maybe some future trends, what you see out there and how you feel technology needs to advance. Some of the things that keep you up at night, or what gets you excited when you look ahead to the future. So Sandeep, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. One is, obviously, generative AI has been on everyone's mind, and I know that the popular press has tried to come up with a fair amount of predictions around that, but it's a really promising technology, and it does keep me up at night, both in terms of, am I missing out on something? Is there something that the organization should be doing that we haven't been doing? And some of these conversations actually help to realize that actually, everybody's sort of finding their way. And the other is, I spend a lot of time thinking about how are the businesses that I support going to evolve. For example, if I think about an investments, capital markets business, I truly think that we will move from macro information, macro assets, macro markets, to very specifically a client of one and a market of one, and data and insights is going to have a huge role to play in that.
Excellent. And Lauren, where do you see kind of a future trend headed?
Sure. Well, we talked about the cloud technology.
Correct.
And we talked about data.
Yeah.
And I think around all the AI and innovation that's coming that way, we underneath the travel industry have a concept around a reservation. And so we're actually really talking within the travel industry about restructuring the way that we think about reservations to be able to leverage these technologies differently than we do today. So there's a concept that's called offer order, and you go toward it versus a book and ticket type of process. I'm using that language, but it's really around being able to, again, back to meeting the customers where they need, restructuring the data, restructuring the underneath, and leveraging cloud technologies, APIs, and that advanced information and analytics and intelligence around our customers' needs to be able to really meet them where they're at and be able to give them the products that they need. Because again, it's about technology really at the end of the day is enabling the end business function. And I think what's interesting is you have to kind of marry up the changes in the tool set to again meet those business needs. And so I think that's really where, when I think about the things that keep me up at night, is like, am I making those connection points of being able to be on the latest technology and leverage them, but also to be able to meet the business needs and not just do something that is cool or what we're hearing in the news or anything like that. So.
Right. The latest shiny object.
The latest shiny object.
Gustaaf, do you see the similar, because also
I think
travel?
that that what keeps me up at night is making sure that there is a secure foundation that you can build upon. A lot of what I see with AI and legislation, we're still not out of the woods with how much flexibility and how much leeway everybody is going to have long term in terms of applying AI and Gen AI, to your business. And so having the right foundational platform so you can build on and make sure that it is secure and versatile, so that whatever legislative demand come into place, that you can actually pivot and make it work.
Excellent. And Andy, we have about a minute left. The pressure's on.
Okay.
So
what am I
looking
most
forward.
excited about three quick things. First is like kind of the new ability for AI to really reason without having to brute force it, right? So I think most people probably are playing with the strawberry version from OpenAI or O1, and we have use cases that's unlocking that we could not unlock before. Tied to that, we have now over 140 agents that are breaking down complex use cases across AT&T that we couldn't solve before that, doing it in a way that are driving more value. And then the last thing, and this is a big break, kind of deal changer for us, is that we've always said, for the last 20 months, we've said human language is the new computer language. Well, the great thing here is that voice is catching up, so it's no longer the written or the typed computer language, but the ability to speak to this and to have that voice interface being the perfect interface to interact with these systems. That's changing a lot of things for us.